I'm a storyteller, a traditional storyteller, which in my country is a tradition that's not really stopped. And I work in the schools, not only the Mandela School, but lots of other schools as well. And I have 170 odd stories in my head. They're all oral tales, traditional tales. They're not been written. They're not what the Germans call the Kunstliche Tale, and they're real stories. And the most important part of my job is the research, is finding the tales. So I spend over half the time sitting, researching in the internet, books, listening to other storytellers. I know most of the storytellers in the world, and getting these stories. And however much I prepare myself and think about the story and think, yeah, this is good, this is going to do it, the second I tell the story, I realize that at the beginning I didn't understand it at all. And afterwards, So I prepare myself before. I come into school every morning with a story in my head that I've sat on the train with my headphones on, listening to Debussy or something like that, and then come into the school, sit in a circle and tell the story, and off it goes. So there's the spark every single time that I tell the tale. And one morning, when it was the day that Jen asked me to do this, she said something about the spark. I thought, spark, okay, a spark, let's be clever. The little spark that fired the bullet that shot Franz Ferdinand, that led to this, that led to that led to my mother meeting my father, that led to me being here. And I thought, that's really contrived and klugscheiße. Leave that alone. Go away, somewhere else, do something else. And that particular day, I had to leave my car, which was broken, and come on the bus, the train, the tube, to get here. And where I live, it takes 2.5 hours to get here. And if I was going to get here on time, I'd have to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning, which, as most of you know, is not actually called 5 o'clock in the morning, it's called the middle of the night. So I had to get up and arrive here, and I was here 1.5 hours too early. So I got off at Zoologische Garden and thought, walk. It's a good thing to do, walk. It's 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:30, so I walked. And while I was walking, I ended up in Kranzler Eck, which is a place that I really don't like. And it started there. I was prepared with the story. I had it in my head. I knew what was going on. I was working out. This is a story. And then suddenly I saw in Kranzler Eck these 2 big cages that have got the birds in. I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you've seen them. And maybe if you've seen them, you had the same thought of me, like, why? What's the point? And I was angry at that point because, this is 6:30 in the morning. At this time, I'm not awake. My head's not awake. We're just not all there. So I'm open to all this stuff. I looked at this thought and I thought, whoa. If I was younger, I always had a pair of pliers in my hand. I'd go click, 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 go on, off you go, and send the birds off. But I'm older now, and I realize that you can't do that because the poor things would die. They get attacked by something or another, and they'd end up being some other bird food. So I realized there was a dilemma here. I thought, I don't want those birds to be in that cage, but I want to let them free, but if I let them free, they'll die. So what do? What's the point? What's the point here? What's going on? And then I realized, of course, obviously, but at 6:30 in the morning, not everything is obvious, that they shouldn't be there in the first place. So don't put them in the cage in the first place. Simple. And I carried on walking, and I walked up Kudamm, I walked up to Wittenbergplatz to get the train, and it was 6:45 in the morning in Berlin, which is like dead. There's nothing going on. You can walk up the street and see things, the shop windows, and there's no people. And as I walked past, I think it was the Adidas shop, which is a good place to walk past. They have glass doors, and behind that glass door I saw a woman. I don't know where she came from, but she was hoovering. The glass doors were thin, I could hear them. So she was hoovering. And as she was hoovering, it was in my mind that was still waking up that there's another bird in a cage. And I reached for my pliers to go and let her out. And then thought, but what if I let her out? Is she going to know what to do? She's going to die. She'll be eaten by some of the birds. And that was just confusing me. And then, at that point, the story that I had been learning is the wrong word, the story that I'd been acclimatizing myself with to tell to the kids in the school just disappeared. And I remembered a story, which I'm going to tell you now. So now I'm going to take off the Chris Rogers hat, put it over there in the corner, and now I am the storyteller. And a storyteller has a bell. This is very emotional for me. Not ringing the bell, the story, I mean. Not emotionally moved by a bell, but the story, I think, we're not sure. I asked lots of people where it came from, but seem to think it comes from India. But it might be Persian as well. They're all a bit of a mix, these stories. But it's old, older than me. There was once, that was a nice laugh, thank you. There was once a very rich merchant, just merchant is enough to say, a very rich merchant, and he had everything. And when he got really rich, he decided to build himself a house, not just a house, a villa, a palace, a monument to himself. So, and his skills at making money. So he built this house, and it was beautiful, but it was pretty empty, because it was big. So he thought, well, I'll fill it up with nice things. So he made a nice library, and he filled it up with books, and he was very clever. He put the books so that as soon as you came in, you could read the title of the book, because he'd never read the book, but it was good for his image, that when you came in, he's read that book, he's a clever man. He was a book snob. And then he had a fine kitchen, and he had a great cook who cooked in the kitchen and made fine things, and his house was full of things, beautiful. He just filled it with everything. And he had a garden, and it was a beautiful garden. And he would sit in the garden, and when people came to his house, they'd come in and see the books and think he's a very intelligent man because he's read that book, I haven't, wow. And well, this is lovely food, and he had a garden, and in this garden people would sit, but the garden was very quiet, and he didn't like this, so he thought, what could I do to make this garden better? And he remembered when he was younger, he lived on the edge of the forest or the jungle or lots of trees. And he would listen to the birds in the jungle, forest, place of trees. And he thought they were really beautiful. So he thought, how nice it would be to get the most beautiful bird there is and put it here in the garden so people would see it. So he sent off all his people to find a bird. And some of them came back with birds, and some of them came back with, but one came back with such a fine, beautiful, exotic bird of paradise and said, here. Oh, wow, he thought this is wonderful, and he put it in a big cage, and he hung it in a tree in the middle of the garden. So now people come, and they see his books, and they have his food, and wow, you've got such a bird, you must be such a person to have such a bird, and it was wonderful. And he was very proud of himself, this monument to him and his ego, and it was great. Then one day he had to go on some business, and he thought how nice it would be for him to get things for his people. So he went down to the cook, and he said to the cook, I'm going on a great journey down to Ceylon, to Sri Lanka, and is there anything I should bring you, anything you would like? And the cook, clever enough, said, oh yes, could you please there's a very famous recipe from there, so if you bring me the recipe, then I can cook the food for you. And he liked that answer, that was just the right answer. So he went to his butler, and he said to his butler, is there anything I can get for you? And the butler said, oh yes, there's some very fine cloth that they have down there. If you bring me that cloth, then I can get you a suit made and for you. And that was the second good answer he'd heard. And everybody came up with answers similar to those. And then he was sitting in the garden the day before he was getting ready to go, and he was just thinking that he was going to miss the place for a few months, and a voice said to him, what about me? Why don't you ask me what I want? And he looked around, and of course the garden was empty, except for the bird. And it was the bird who had asked him asked the question, why don't you ask me? And he looked at the bird and said, well, okay, I'll go with this. What would you like? Is there anything I can bring you? And the bird said, yes, there is something I really would like you to do for me. Set me free. And no, I can't do that, said the merchant. It's not possible. If I do that, then the people will see an empty cage. And no, I like having you here. It's very nice. Sorry, I'm not going to let you free. Anything in the world that you want, I'll do, but I'm not going to set you free. And the bird was a bit fed up with this and said, well, if there's anything, really, you said anything I like, well, please do something for me. When you go down where you're going to, as you come out of the city on the way back, you'll come past a forest. If you could go into this forest for me and then go up to the hill that's in the middle of the forest, and on top of the hill you'll see there's lots of very old trees. Shout out very loudly to all the birds that are flying around you in those trees, where I am, because that's where I come from. And if you tell them where I am, my family won't worry about me anymore. And he said, well, he's there, the bird. He said, well, yes, that's fair enough, I'll do that. So off he went. And he came down to Sri Lanka, Ceylon, and he did his business, and he made a lot of money, more money. And he bought the things that he was asked to get, the cloth for his new suit, and the recipe, and he bought some special food, and he bought some special things. And as he was coming out, and everything was done, and they're all coming back again, he suddenly remembered the bird. And he was feeling very generous, because he'd made some money, and he was feeling very open-hearted, and he thought, I'll do that. Of course I will. So he stopped the whole group of people that he was traveling with and said, just wait here, I'll be back. And he disappeared into the forest. And he came to the hill. Yeah. And he came up to the hill and he stood there and he saw all the trees and thought, right, fair enough. And he shouted out exactly what the bird had asked him to say. And the minute that he'd finished, the second that he'd finished, as soon as he'd finished, from the very top of one of the trees, at the very top branch, a bird, remarkably like the bird that he had in the cage, fell from up and landed on the ground. Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. What have I done? He said, that must be the brother or the uncle or of the bird in my cage. And now I've told him what's happened and he's so sad and upset that his cousin or whatever is, and he's died. Oh, I feel terrible. This is not a good day. And he left the forest and went back to where all his people were and traveled on, and it was really worrying him that oh no, this is a terrible thing. What am I going to tell the bird when I get home? I'll ignore him. He got home. He gave the cloth to the butler, who was very happy, who made the suit that he put on. And he gave the recipe and the food, and he gave all the things, and he sat in the garden, and the bird said, well, did you do what I asked you to do? Yeah, I did. And what happened? Did anybody say anything? Well, no, what happened was that one of the birds looks remarkably like you, fell and platch. I'm so sorry. And at that moment, the bird in the cage fell off his perch and went platch on the ground. And the merchant thought, oh no, it's happened again. Oh no, what have I done? It must be that he's now so upset, I've broken his heart, because he's heard that his brother, his uncle, or his cousin has fallen from and he's dead. Oh dear, this is a terrible thing. I'm so sorry. I've killed 2 birds now, this is bad. And he opened the cage up and he took this poor bird out. And he went over and he put it on a hedge and thought, I've done a terrible thing. And at that moment, the bird sat up and looked at him and said, no, you haven't, and flew off. And that is the end of my tale. And I told this story, and I've told it to 3rd grade and 1st and 2nd class children in many, many schools here in Berlin. I told it not long ago, and to older children too. And I told it on this day, I think, and I remember talking about it then afterwards, and we talked about cages then, and about education and how, and I talked about this the woman in Adidas and how that if we have a good education, then we're not going to get stuck in cages and da. And one of the children turned around and said to me, well, we're stuck in a cage. And then immediately, as quick as you can imagine, another child said, yes, but if we learn, we won't be continually stuck in cages. And as I say, I prepare my stories, I prepare to go and tell stories, but there's nothing in the world that will prepare you for a sentence such as that. And that is what makes a storyteller a storyteller. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.